This is live from New Delhi. You're watching TT India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhattan. Coming up in the next hour, Britain gets new Prime Minister. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Britain must rediscover its identity in his first address at 10 Downing Street. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a 3-day visit to Russia and Austria. First Prime Minister level visit to Austria after 40 years. Iranians vote in the presidential runoff. Tight race between lawmaker Masoud Pezeshkian and former Revolutionary Guard member Saeed Jalili. Results expected by Saturday. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says ready to discuss nuances of peace proposals to end conflict in Ukraine during meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Russia on July 8 to 9th and hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And this is going to be the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit. It will be Prime Minister Modi's first trip to Russia since Moscow launched its military offensive in Ukraine. The visit also follows Prime Minister Modi's re-election for the third successive term. Prime Minister Modi last visited Russia in 2019 for an economic forum in the far eastern port of Vladivostok. He last travelled to Moscow in 2015.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be on a two-nation tour from 8th July to 10th of July. He will be on an official visit to Russia on the invitation of Russian President Vladimir Putin on the 8th of July. Both the leaders will engage in bilateral talks and discuss a range of issues from defense, culture, regional and global developments. India and Russia share a cordial bilateral relation. The growing investment ties between both the countries stands testimony to the long-standing friendship of India and Russia.
India-Russia bilateral trade has seen a sharp increase in 2023-24. It has since touched close to $65 billion, primarily due to strong energy cooperation between India and Russia. With Indian exports of $4 billion and Indian imports being close to 60 billion, trade remains imbalanced, which is a matter of priority in our discussions with the Russian side.
The Prime Minister of India will start his second leg of the tour to Vienna, the capital of Austria, on 9th of July. This is the first Prime Minister level visit to Austria from India after a long gap of 40 years. India and Austria will be engaging in multiple bilateral and delegation level talks during the visit. The focus areas during the visit to Vienna are likely to be business, innovation and technology.
This will be Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi's first visit to Austria. The last Prime Ministerial visit, I must mention, from India to Austria took place more than 40 years ago. In terms of programming elements, the Prime Minister, besides the ceremonial welcome being accorded to him, would also call on the President of Austria and hold restricted delegation level talks, as also a high-level business engagement in Austria.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the two nations is going to strengthen ties between India and Russia, and the first Prime Minister level visit to Austria will further enhance the bilateral ties between India and Austria. With Dibendu Mondal, Tanvi Taneja for DD India.
Labour Party on Friday surged to a landslide win in parliamentary polls, ending 14 years of Conservative government. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer pledged to rebuild the country by taking, and I quote, heat out of politics, unquote, after years of upheaval and strife. This with the caveat that any improvements would take time and he would need to first rebuild faith in politics. On the other hand, the outgoing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak took responsibility for his Conservatives' defeat.
I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss. To all the Conservative candidates and campaigners who worked tirelessly but without success, I'm sorry that we could not deliver what your efforts deserved.
14 years of Conservative Party rule came to an end on Friday. Rishi Sunak's Conservatives suffered the worst performance in the party's long history. In his final speech as Prime Minister outside Downing Street, Sunak apologised to Conservative candidates and campaigners for not delivering a Conservative election.
But once the formal arrangements...
Sunak later met King Charles at Buckingham Palace to formally tender his resignation as Prime Minister of United Kingdom. Labour Party leader Keir Starmer met King Charles at Buckingham Palace. Britain's king asked Labour leader Starmer to form the new government. Britain's new Prime Minister, Starmer, promised to kickstart an era of national renewal.
But now our country has voted decisively for change, for national renewal and a return of politics to public service. If you voted Labour yesterday, we will carry the responsibility of your trust as we rebuild our country.
Following Labour Party's victory, world leaders sent their congratulatory messages to Keir Starmer.
I will congratulate Keir Starmer on his election victory. I look forward to welcoming him and to meet him at the NATO summit in Washington next week. I have met also Keir Starmer here at the NATO headquarters, and I know that he's a strong supporter of NATO, of the transatlantic alliance, and also committed to ensure that the United Kingdom continues to be a strong and very committed NATO ally.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote on social media platform X, "Heartiest congratulations and best wishes to Keir Starmer on the remarkable victory in the UK general elections. I look forward to our positive and constructive collaboration to further strengthen the India-UK comprehensive strategic partnership in all areas, fostering mutual growth and prosperity." European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen writes, "Congratulations, Keir Starmer, on your electoral victory. I look forward to working with you in a constructive partnership to address common challenges and strengthen European security." German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says Starmer will make an excellent Prime Minister. French President Emmanuel Macron took to X to congratulate the new British Prime Minister. He writes, "Congratulations, Keir Starmer, on your victory. Pleased with our first discussion. We will continue the work begun with UK for our bilateral cooperation, for peace, security in Europe, and for climate and for AI." Labour won over 410 seats, while the Conservative lost about 250 lawmakers, including a record number of senior ministers and former Prime Minister Liz Truss. While Scottish National Party posted its worst showing at a British parliamentary election since 2010, a major setback for its push for a new independence referendum. While Nigel Farage was elected to Parliament, marking the emergence of his populist Reform UK as a new force in British politics. Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India.
And following inviting Keir Starmer to form government, United Kingdom's King Charles also approved new ministerial appointments. As per the statement issued by the British government, Angela Rayner has been appointed as the Secretary of the State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. She will be the Deputy Prime Minister of UK, while Rochelle Reeves has been appointed as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. David Lammy will serve as Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs. Veth Cooper will be Secretary of State for the Home Department, while John Healey is the new Secretary of State for Defence. Pat McFadden has been appointed as the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. DD India's Ollie Barrett joins us live from London. To begin with, impactful opening remarks by UK Prime Minister setting the agenda. Ollie, what is the larger message that he's trying to send to his countrymen?
I think what Keir Starmer is trying to do with that first speech outside Downing Street is inject a message of hope and optimism and positivity about what his new government can achieve, but also an element of realism as well, setting out some of the challenges that he wants to address. And that list of challenges is long and it may be fairly daunting. The UK's finances are not in great shape, and that's why the Conservatives and other critics of the Labour Party's economic manifesto, for example, were saying that it didn't necessarily add up and there might have to be more tax rises to pay for some of the public services that Labour says they can deliver and improve in the years ahead. Now, Keir Starmer insists that he and his Labour Party can provoke growth in the British economy, and that will help them pay for the public services that they say the country deserves. But these issues and others are very, very difficult indeed. And Keir Starmer will know that his government needs to hit the ground running if he's to take the public with him.
So to hit the ground running, he has his cabinet in place. Team Keir Starmer is already in place. What do you make of the new cabinet, the new deputy prime minister, so on and so forth? Because as you clearly mentioned, he has inherited daunting challenges, from beleaguered economy to fix lots of issues in Britain.
Absolutely right, and so therefore those cabinet ministers who are coming into post now inherit daunting to-do lists for their governmental departments. A lot of the appointments that we've seen so far are appointments that are effectively mirroring the roles that they had in the shadow cabinet. So Rachel Reeves, for example, becomes the UK's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. Well, she was shadow Chancellor in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet. Angela Rayner becomes the Deputy Prime Minister, among other roles. She was the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party in the shadow cabinet. We know that David Lammy has been appointed as the Foreign Secretary. He was the shadow Foreign Secretary, and so many of these individuals have experience of shadowing the brief that they're now going to take over, and that gives a certain element of continuity. It can't all replicate what was seen in the shadow cabinet, not least because one member of the shadow cabinet, Jonathan Ashworth, actually lost his seat in the general election, so that role will have to be moved to someone else, and there may be other changes as well. But you can see a theme here that Keir Starmer clearly feels that the experience some of these politicians have in shadowing government ministers will help them, as we were saying, hit the ground running when they get into their government posts.
So the cabinet, the new cabinet, doesn't really come as a surprise, but what are you picking up from the Conservative Party camp? There seems to be the race of the leadership because several top Conservative MPs, including the 8 cabinet ministers, if I'm not wrong, have already lost their seats. So it's clearly an end of a Conservative era as of now.
Exactly right. It's really difficult for the Conservatives and really unpredictable for the Conservatives, because when you talk about the race to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the party, several of those contenders aren't in the House of Commons anymore. They didn't win their seats and therefore they won't be able to take part in a leadership campaign. So that has rather narrowed the field somewhat. There is all sorts of speculation about some of the top contenders, such as Kemi Badenoch, who held various roles, including Equalities Minister and Trade Secretary in the previous government. She's considered by many to be the front runner, but there's also uncertainty about exactly how the process is going to play out and how long it will take. Rishi Sunak said that he would remain Conservative leader once the details of the process to replace him have been settled. Well, that's also not yet clear, because the 1922 committee of Conservative backbench MPs doesn't have a chairman at the moment. It's the chairman that settles those rules. So even that is uncertain for the Conservatives right now.
All right, interesting there. Thank you very much, Ollie Barrett, for joining us live from London. Thank you. And still to come on DD India News Hour. This is what we have next for you. Coming up on the show, efforts to secure Gaza ceasefire and hostage release gains momentum. In a new twist, opinion polls in France show that France's far-right National Rally Party will likely fall short of an absolute majority in forthcoming parliamentary polls. And Russian President Vladimir Putin agrees to talk peace with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Let's move on now. Voting for the second round of closely fought presidential election concludes in Iran, and this election is a tight race between lawmaker Masoud Pezeshkian, the sole moderate in the original field of 4 candidates, and former Revolutionary Guards member Saeed Jalili. The runoff takes place after no candidate could secure a majority in the first round of elections on 28th of June, which saw a historic low turnout of 40%.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei cast the first ballot in a runoff presidential election that will test the clerical ruler's popularity amid voter apathy in the Islamic State.
I have heard that people's enthusiasm and interest are greater than before. I hope that's true, and if so, it's delightful. I hope our dear people, by the grace of God, are successful, and hopefully we all have our president tomorrow.
The runoff follows a June 28th ballot with historic low turnout when over 60% of Iranian voters abstained from the snap election for a successor to Ibrahim Raisi following his death in a helicopter crash. Voters face a choice between the hardline former nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili and Masoud Pezeshkian, a heart surgeon and long-time parliament member who has allied himself with moderates and reformists within Iran's Shiite theocracy. Polling began at 4:30 GMT and continued till 14:30 GMT. The voting comes amid wider tensions in the Middle East over the Israel-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip and a standoff with the West over Tehran's nuke programs. After Iran's direct attack on Israel in April this year and the escalating tensions by militia groups like Hezbollah and Houthi rebels armed by Tehran have made Iran a party to the war. Moreover, Iran continues to enrich uranium at near weapons-grade levels and maintains a stockpile large enough to build nuclear weapons. Its 2015 nuclear deal with world powers had collapsed in 2018 after then US President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew America from the accord. In Iran, there are more than 61 million eligible voters, with about 18 million of them between 18 to 30. Preliminary election results are expected to be released by Saturday. This result will decide the presidential phase of Iran. Although Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has the final say on all matters of state, presidents can bend the country's policies towards confrontation or negotiation with the West. Bureau Report, DD India.
A renewed push for a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza gained a lot of traction on Friday following Hamas's revised proposal and Israel's agreement to reopen talks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has informed US President Joe Biden that he would send a team to resume negotiations, signaling a potential breakthrough in the stalled peace efforts. US President Joe Biden has welcomed the move, and a source in Israel's negotiating team says that there was now a real chance of achieving the agreement. Moving on to French polls, where the far-right National Rally is set to be the biggest party in parliament as France approaches the decisive second round of the general polls. Now, the polls also show, though, the Populist Party may fall also short of a majority, which could lead to a legislative gridlock in a situation of a hung parliament. And more than 50 French candidates and activists have been physically attacked ahead of the weekend's decisive election vote. DD India's Ross Collin reports.
Well, the latest polls before Sunday's decisive runoff vote do show the national rally getting at least 220 seats. However, you need 289 for a majority in France's National Assembly. The left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front, set to get a minimum of around 190 seats, and Emmanuel Macron's party around 140 at the minimum. That would put them third. They were first, the biggest party in Parliament, before he called the election, and as a result of that election, he has led his party likely from first place to third place. Now, we did hear on Friday from the French Interior Minister. He was talking about election violence, saying that there have been at least 50 incidents this week of aggression towards candidates and activists. We do know that on Wednesday, the French government chief spokesperson and one of Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party MPs, Prisca Thévenot, well, she and her campaign team were putting up election posters when they were attacked, leaving one of her activists with a broken jaw. 30,000 police officers are going to be on standby, ready on Sunday to try to monitor the election. 5,000 here in the French capital alone, and they will also try to keep a lid on any unrest which could break out if the far right do indeed not only win the greatest number of seats but also secure an absolute majority. Ross Cullen in Paris reporting for DD India.
From Paris, shifting focus to Russia, where Russian President Vladimir Putin has told Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban that he was ready to discuss the nuances of peace proposals to end the conflict in Ukraine. In fact, Putin, who received Orban in the Kremlin on Friday, has said that he was ready to hear the Hungarian leader's position on Ukraine and to get a readout from Orban of the views of the other European partners. Putin, who noted that Hungary currently held the EU's rotating presidency, made the comments ahead of Kremlin talks between the two leaders. Orban also told Putin that he wants to discuss issues which are important for Europe. Putin said last month Russia would end the conflict in Ukraine only if Kyiv agreed to drop its NATO ambitions and hand over the entirety of 4 provinces claimed by Moscow's and the demands Kyiv swiftly rejected as tantamount to surrender. And staying with Russia, Russia's defense ministry has announced on Friday that it is conducting military exercises involving mobile launchers for nuclear missiles. The drills, which will cover a distance of over 100 kilometers, aim to practice deployment and concealment techniques. The initial phase of the exercise will involve missile launcher crews from 2 units, with additional crews set to join the drills later on. Well, some news coming in from US, where lots is being done, it seems, by the White House to defuse a political crisis over Biden's shaky debate performance last week. The latest being the television interview with ABC, which he will be doing during his Madison visit, where he will be closely watched for signs of whether his mental faculty is failing. Now, however, Biden is time and again insisting on staying in the race and that his health is not faltering. Biden is under enormous pressure to step aside and open a path for his 59-year-old Vice President Kamala Harris. Hurricane Beryl is hitting parts of eastern Mexico after ravaging the Caribbean island nations of Grenada and Jamaica. The fierce storm made landfall northeast of Tulum on Friday morning and may hit further north and into the U.S. in a few days after crossing the Gulf of Mexico. Caroline Malone reports.
Mexico is watching out for storm surges of up to 6 feet from Hurricane Beryl. The major storm already brought sustained winds of 160 kilometres per hour, with gusts much stronger, and up to 10 inches of rain. Emergency services are on standby, with 13,000 workers and mobile kitchens and water treatment plants set up. In Grenada, most buildings on 2 islands were damaged, impacting 10,000 people and major infrastructure when the storm hit there. Jamaica's main airport was hit too, with the jet bridge roof ripped off by the storm, and officials scrambling to try and keep the airport operating during repairs. Well, the Cayman Islands were spared the worst of it as Beryl skirted past there on Thursday. The hurricane is now heading northwest across the Gulf of Mexico, where it may strengthen again before hitting northeastern Mexico, and then onto the coast of the US and the state of Texas early next week. The US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says there will be an above normal number of storms this year. Beryl started the hurricane season earlier than usual as the higher strength Force 5 storm. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
Staying with US, thousands of people in Northern California have been told to leave their homes as wildfires grow across the state during a heat wave. About 28,000 people were under evacuation warnings or orders on Thursday after the Thompson fire broke out 2 days earlier. Dangerously hot weather is expected to continue with temperatures of 118 Fahrenheit forecast in some areas until early next week. No one has died so far, while 74 structures across the state have been destroyed or damaged from fires this season. As of Thursday evening, the Thompson fire was 7% contained, indicating a little bit of progress as a crew of nearly 2,000 battles the flame. Elsewhere in Russia, a state of emergency remains in effect in Sakha-Yakutia Republic as wildfires rage across several regions. The Sakha-Yakutia Directorate of the Russian Ministry of Emergencies reports 123 active wildfires covering over 300,000 hectares. Hundreds of firefighters and special equipment have been deployed, extinguishing 11 wildfires in the past 24 hours. A BE-200 aircraft has dropped over 100 tons of water on a wildfire near a village. The federal state of emergency declared earlier this month also includes the remote South Siberian region of Tuva. Well, in a massive push to India's defence prowess, its annual defence production has hit a record high of approximately 1.27 lakh crore in the year 2023-24, with the Make in India program or campaign crossing new milestones. This report from Akshay Dongre tells us more.
A big boost to India's ambitious transformation from a defence-reliant nation to a global defence manufacturing hub. India registered the highest ever growth in the value of defence production in the fiscal year 2023 to 2024. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, while congratulating the country, said, and I quote, "The Make in India program is crossing new milestones year after year under the leadership of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. India has registered the highest ever growth in value of defence production in 2023 to 2024. The value of production has reached to rupees 1.26 lakh crore in 2023 to 2024, which is 16.8% higher than the value of production of previous financial year. Many congratulations to our country, including DPSUs, other PSUs, manufacturing defence items and private industry. The government is committed to create more conducive regime for developing India as leading global defence manufacturing hub." Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated the entire country as well. In a social media post, Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Very encouraging development. Compliments to all those who have contributed to this feat. We are fully committed to nurturing a supportive environment to further enhance our capabilities and establish India as a leading global defence manufacturing hub. This will enhance our security apparatus and make us Atmanirbhar."
The kind of policy reforms that have taken place, the establishment of the defence corridors, more than anything, the restructuring of the DRDO, the corporatization of the ordnance factories, it's the synergy between public and private sector industries, I would say the integration of micro, small, medium scale industries. The total thrust has been on Atmanirbhar. And this indigenization thrust has greatly assisted India becoming a great global hub for defence manufacturing.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, soon after coming to power in 2014, launched the Make in India initiative to create and encourage companies to develop, manufacture and assemble products made in India and incentivize dedicated investments into manufacturing. Defence manufacturing has remained at the centre stage of the policy. After the launch of the initiative, Indian defence sector has registered a massive boost in manufacturing and production capabilities. From fighter jets to main battle tanks, missiles to aircraft carrier, India is steadily moving on a path to self-reliance in defence. In just 10 years, the annual defence production, which was around Rs 40,000 crore in 2014, has now crossed a record of over Rs 1.26 lakh crore last year. Akshay Dongre, DD India.
And still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. Keir Starmer is the next Prime Minister of Britain, ending decade of Conservative rule. Former UK government advisor from London joins us to decode the United Kingdom's fresh political churn. And India's National Board of Examination announces revised date for NEET PG exam. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. And now let's move on and take a look at the headlines once again. Britain gets new Prime Minister. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Britain must rediscover its identity in his first address at 10 Downing Street. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a 3-day visit to Russia and Austria. First Prime Minister level visit to Austria after 40 years. Iranians vote in the presidential runoff. Tight race between lawmaker Masoud Pezeshkian and former Revolutionary Guards member Saeed Jalili. Results expected by Saturday. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says ready to discuss nuances of peace proposals to end conflict in Ukraine during meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. On to our lead story. Now, Keir Starmer is the new Prime Minister of Britain after his Labour Party delivered a decisive win in the general elections on Thursday. Well, let's take a look at Starmer's political journey.
When Keir Starmer was elected to lead Britain's Labour Party in 2020, right after the party suffered its worst general election defeat in 85 years, he made it his mission to make the party electable again. 4 years later, after 14 years of governments led by the rival Conservative Party, Starmer was poised on Friday morning to take Britain's top job. According to an English newspaper, after losing a by-election in 2021, Starmer had told his friends that he wanted to quit politics and work in a bookstore. But life had bigger plans for him. Starmer, a 61-year-old former human rights lawyer, has led a remarkable turnaround for the Labour Party today. It was just over 4 years that his party suffered its worst election defeat since the 1930s. He has pulled the party to the political centre while capitalising on the failings of 3 Conservative Prime Ministers. Starmer was born on September 2, 1962 in Oxted to a working-class family. His mother was a nurse while his father worked as an equipment maker. Starmer was the first in his family to attend university. He studied law at Leeds University. He began his career as a barrister in 1987 and specialised in human rights cases as well as representing clients through legal aid and pro bono work. Starmer was first elected to Parliament in 2015. He has been the leader of the opposition and the Labour Party in the UK Parliament since 2020. In its poll manifesto, Labour said that it will seek a new strategic partnership with India, including a free trade agreement. For years, the story of India-UK ties had been underwhelming, despite the long intertwined histories of the two nations. With Brexit finally out of the way, the India-UK partnership has begun to blossom, characterised by India's key role in post-Brexit Britain's foreign and trade policy. Ties were upgraded to a comprehensive strategy partnership in 2022 during former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's tenure, accompanied by a 2030 roadmap to deepen bilateral relations. Both countries have been working towards a free trade agreement, but the negotiations remain stalled as of now. Starmer may lack the star power of some of his predecessors, but he has led a remarkable turnaround for the Labour Party today. What will be most interesting to Britain and the world is what he does now that he and his party have power. Nupur Praveen's report for DD India.
In fact, the Conservative Party, who have led Britain for past 14 years, through economic austerity, we show that in the report, the Brexit, the COVID, and not to forget, no fewer than 5 prime ministers which were dealt with a devastating blow, with their number of seats falling from 371 to just 121. This has been their worst ever performance in almost 200 years, as published in some of the reports in UK. We're going to talk, in fact, take a greater look or a deeper look at this churn in UK polity, the Labour landslide win, and the Conservative demise, so to say. And we are very, very glad and honoured to be joined by Mr. Adam Schwartz from London, and also Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, former senior diplomat, joining us on this special show. Thank you very much, Adam. Adam is the distinguished British writer and a political commentator. In fact, we would like to tell our viewers that Adam has also previously worked as a policy advisor in UK government's various verticals and institutions. Coming to you, Adam, first. Very precise but forceful opening remarks by your Prime Minister, setting the tone. Would you call it a nationalist tone when he starts by saying that rediscovering the UK's identity, and the way he has presented such a compelling future vision, considering the challenges that he has inherited from the outgoing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak? How do you see this big shift and big churn?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a nationalist sentiment, but I would very much say that it was a sentiment of unity. I think it was very much a speech that was designed to be quite modest in nature. He very much recognised the fact that actually, even though he's got a huge majority, that actually there were still major issues to do in terms of gaining public trust from government, because we know that actually, when there's a lack of public trust in government, it doesn't just affect the governing party, but in fact it affects public perspectives of all parties, really. And so that's why he was really trying to emphasize this concept of trying to understand voters, trying to recognize their fears that actually even a change in government won't produce better socio-economic conditions, which really led, I would say, to the Conservatives' defeat. But I think it was a very sort of well choreographed sort of presentation.
Okay.
We saw scenes that were quite reminiscent to what we saw in the 1997 election, when Tony Blair had a similar landslide victory, where we had crowds outside waiting outside Downing Street, not only waving Union flags, but also flags of all the other nations, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales as well. But really, Starmer as well also tried to set expectations, and he said that rebuilding Britain will take quite a long time. I think that's really important, because Starmer is someone who's had quite a cautious approach to his leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. And he wanted to make sure that any promises he made actually could be kept, and that's why this address really was kept to be quite modest.
All right. Okay, you're calling it modest. That's interesting. But talking about UK's fluctuating political trajectory, Adam, in the last 5 to 6 years, you've had 5 prime ministers since 2016, 3 in the last 2 years alone. But the question here is that, can Labour not only deliver on those promises, but we are also looking at more consolidation and continuity of power at the top?
I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, stability has really been the major issue in government, really, for the majority of this parliament, mostly due to the fact that we've had, changes in prime ministers, that we've never really seen before in just a single parliament. So really, that is the branding that Keir Starmer has tried to push forward during the election campaign. And of course, he's going to have to try to deliver that in government. But I think really the key question for Keir Starmer's policy objective is actually going to be what happens fiscally. Because of course, we all know that if he wants to make huge changes to public services and the economy, he's going to have to spend more in some areas. It's very difficult to do that unless you're making cuts in some areas, or if you're not borrowing more. So I think really that is the major area that's yet to be seen.
Beleaguered economy and fix those issues there. Adam, stay with us. Let me also once again welcome Ambassador Wadhwa. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, sir. Thank you very much. So, Very predictable question. I think you would already preempt that. What does Starmer mean for India? What does he bring to table, considering that the manifesto clearly talked about FTA, and throughout the campaigning we could see that he's tried to rebuild the Labour's connect with the Indian diaspora, pretty much strategically. Your thoughts?
You're absolutely correct, because in the run-up to the elections, the Labour Party obviously was at great pains to explain the strategic partnership with India and the fact that there would be continuity in this strategic partnership. And besides the free trade agreement, the Labour Party has also talked about strengthening of ties with India in technology, in environment, in education and security. And most importantly, just before the elections, around the end of June, I think it was the 28th of June, when Starmer was in the Swaminarayan temple.
Yes.
And then during that visit, he particularly talked about the fact that the Labour Party was particularly against any kind of Hindu phobia, setting at rest all the apprehensions, because in the past, as we all know, there's been some testy times as far as the Labour Party is concerned between India and the UK during their tenure. And that was sort of set at rest. And in the run-up to these elections, many times over, the Labour Party stressed that the strategic partnership would continue.
So this was in sharp contrast to the alienation we saw during their leader Corbyn over a perceived anti-India stance on Kashmir. I mean, they are now sort of refreshing their position in sharp contrast to what used to be their thoughts earlier vis-a-vis India. Ambassador Wadhwa.
Yes, well, during Jeremy Corbyn's time, particularly in 2019, when there was that particular resolution by the Labour Party, which talked about international intervention in Kashmir and a call for the UN-led referendum. And before that, of course, in 1997, when Robin Cook made that statement in Pakistan during a visit before the Queen visited India, about the fact that India and Pakistan would talk to each other to resolve the issue, and also offered to intervene. Well, that did not go down too well in India at that point in time. So we moved a lot from there, from that position, and we saw that after Jeremy Corbyn, we've had Ian Lavery, who was the new leader, and he set at rest all these apprehensions by saying that Labour Party would not be pro-Pakistan or pro-India.
Okay.
And thereafter, we've seen an equilibrium in the thought of the Labour Party going forward.
Okay. I would like to go back to Adam on that now. Huge task cut out for Team Starmer. Now your cabinet is in place and Labour is back in game after 14 years. So what do you make of the cabinet? And what do you think are going to be the cabinet's initial steps, priorities, top priorities?
Well, I think the cabinet virtually mirrors exactly Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet from the last few years. So there really aren't many two surprises there in terms of who is going to be in his top team. We have Rachel Reeves, who is the Chancellor now, the first ever female Chancellor, who's really been the architect of Keir Starmer's fiscal policy. So I think really, that is the fundamental issue at the moment for the government, is trying to create some kind of stability, but also crucially trying to get growth into a position where actually that produces the kind of tax revenue to try to drive some of the public spending programs that the government, I'm sure, would love to do. We have lots of other issues, such as immigration, which is a very controversial issue at the moment. We have Yvette Cooper, who's come in, who is actually one of the few people to come in who has previous government experience from before 2010 under the Labour Party. So she will be the Interior Minister. So she has a very delicate task about how to handle boat crossings in the Channel. We know that's a very difficult issue for the Labour Party, as it's tried to win some of the kind of right-wing votes in the UK that have been very concerned about that. Other issues, I would say it's broadly, consensus with the Conservative Party, on defence, for example, very well aligned with the Conservatives on that and on Ukraine as well. So I'd really say at the moment, what Keir Starmer needs to do is to create some kind of aspect of stability and continuity and predictability for both voters, but also the markets as well.
I had that point exactly on my mind, Adam. The promises and all those to-do list, but then at the end of the day, the way Britain's politics has been panning out in the last 5 to 6 years, we are actually now looking at stability, continuity and more consolidation. And he comes, the party is back at the helm after more than a decade. So that's not going to be an easy task.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, again, the main issue is rebuilding public confidence. And even though he has delivered a huge, a stable government, it doesn't necessarily mean that automatically delivers stable, public approval of it. But I think, the brilliant thing for Keir Starmer is the fact that he will have major authority over his own party, because he has achieved something that was extraordinary in that, only 5 years ago, the consensus was that it would take the Labour Party a decade to really get into a position where it could actually compete for power again. So, for the first time in a very long time, we have a Prime Minister who has major, confidence from his colleagues, which really empowers him to act, which empowers him to take much more bold actions. But I think we probably won't see anything too extreme over the next 6 months. I think generally, we will see a settling in period of stabilization. And I think really only at a later point will we see Keir Starmer with a second phase of policy that will be perhaps quite a bit more radical to what we're going to see over this initial phase.
Okay, interesting. Ambassador Wadhwa, do you also see some sort of shift now under the leadership of Keir Starmer, India-UK relationship? Are there going to be some big announcements, expectations, some game-changing promises made between the two? Or it's going to be diplomatics as usual?
I see more of a continuity in the relationship and building up on the strategic partnership. And I think it's most important to note here that both the Conservatives and the Labour have stressed upon the importance of the free trade agreement with India. Much of the work on that agreement has already been completed. So whichever party would come to power, it was expected that these negotiations would come to a fruitful conclusion in the nearest future. So that's one step that can be taken quite easily. Secondly, I think it's the involvement of the UK in the Indo-Pacific, and that's where Keir Starmer has talked about the involvement of United Kingdom in the region, which is also a sign of continuity as far as the British policy is concerned towards the region. And as far as India is concerned, that's also good news. The fact that Labour has been very strong in advocating climate change, and also they've laid stress on new technologies going forward and environment and education. I think all these areas are ones in which both sides are very keen to advance their relations. So I'm quite sanguine about a bright future for Indo-UK relationship.
Adam, I would like to have your thoughts on this point on dominance of Indian diaspora and the way soon the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has always reached out to the diaspora during the campaigning, as reiterated by Ambassador Wadhwa also. Major parties also fielded Indian community as candidates. In fact, I've been told a record number of candidates from Indian community have not only contested in these elections, but won these elections. Your thoughts?
Well, of course, the UK has a historic relationship with India that goes back, a very long time. And I'm really pleased that, of course, that, UK-India relations has really become a kind of point of political consensus in the UK that is very much based on the Indian diaspora in the UK, which has had such an extraordinary and profound impact upon the UK's economy in terms of contributions to its jobs and its culture as well. So I think that's really formed the basis for a sort of modern view about, considering India to be a major strategic partner, which of course, as you mentioned, Keir Starmer does, and he mentioned during his campaign. I think in terms of a trade deal, the one point of caution that I would make is that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have indicated that they may be looking to change the nature of the deal that the UK has with the EU. Now, if that fundamentally changes the way that the UK does its customs with the EU, that may impede on the UK's ability to unilaterally make trade deals with other countries such as India. So we'll have to watch that relationship quite closely, because it may have an impact impact on India. But I would say that, even with that having been said, we know that the UK considers a trade deal with India to be a major strategic and, something that's crucial importance to UK foreign policy.
Okay. Ambassador Wadhwa, would you like to add to that? And final comments from you, sir. How do you see the shift in UK polity with Labour back in the game?
Well, I think I don't have much to add to what I've said already, but I think, in terms of continuity, yes, there would be continuity, but there would be obviously some differences which could be there, as far as migration and mobility, for example, is concerned, and also policies with regard to the people who are going to work in the UK temporarily. That is one issue which was negotiated at great length with the previous government as far as India is concerned. And here there would be nuances which would be different. So I would tend to agree that there would be some issues that will crop up going forward in the FTA negotiations, which have been there in the past. But I'm quite confident that those can be quite easily overcome, because after all, as far as India is concerned, if you have a give and take in services, then I don't see a problem going forward in that, because both economies are mutually interdependent as far as services are concerned. And I think that building on the services side, investments will also go forward between the two countries.
All right, sir. Adam, last word from you. What are you picking up as far as Conservative camp is concerned? Now, we believe that there's this battle already on to seize the leadership. Who takes it over next?
Well, what the Conservative Party needs right now is unity, but I think we're actually going to see the exact opposite, which is going to be fueled by the fact that the sort of hard right Reform Party has actually won 4 seats in Parliament and won about 16% of the vote. So, that is really going to fuel the civil war that's taken place in the Conservative Party, really since the 2016 Brexit referendum, about how far to the right to go. So I think there's going to be a major battle in the Conservative Party. And I think, it's really important for the Conservatives to recognise that they try to move to the right of the, of politics. And actually all that happened is that voters ended up voting for the real thing, the real sort of authentic, version of authoritarianism. So I don't think it's a strategy that will work for them. But I think, we're going to see a period of opposition for the Conservatives for a very long time, similar to what we saw under the Labour Party over the last decade, really.
All right, we'll leave it there. Many, many thanks, Adam Schwartz and Ambassador Wadhwa, for joining us. Adam joining us from London, former advisor to the UK government and very distinguished political commentator there in the United Kingdom. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we end this show, we take also a look at other stories that are making news around the world very quickly. Let's begin with Spain, where the hearing in the high-profile case of Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's wife, Begoña Sánchez, has been postponed till 19th of July. Her attorney had petitioned that Begoña was not notified beforehand regarding another lawsuit. Wall Street's main indexes were muted at the open on Friday after data showed U.S. job growth slowed to a still healthy pace in June. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose to 5.40 points at the open. Bulgarian archaeologists have found a very well-preserved 2-meter-high statue with a head in the ancient city of Heralkia Sintica. It was made by an artist who used a whole marble block to make the statue in the 2nd century AD, when this practice was already archaic. Well, we are taking a quick look at some sports news that are coming up next. In fact, some more news. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with the Indian contingent heading to Paris Olympics in New Delhi. India is set to dispatch approximately 120 athletes to Paris, aiming to surpass their achievement of securing 7 medals in the Tokyo Games. Prime Minister Modi conveyed his unwavering belief that India's contingent heading to Olympics will definitely bring honours to the nation and fulfill the hopes and dreams of 1.4 billion citizens.
खेलने के लिए जा रहे हैं, हम अपना बेस्ट परफॉर्मेंस के लिए जा रहे हैं, लेकिन ओलंपिक सीखने का भी बहुत बड़ा मैदान होता है। फलाना देश कैसे खेल रहा है, टिकना देश कैसे खेल रहा है, और वो चीज़ों को पूरी तरह ऑब्जर्व करता है, कोशिश करता है एब्सॉर्ब करने की, और आकर के अपने कोच को भी बताया कि यार भाई मैंने देखा उसने तो बड़ा कमाल कर दिया था लास्ट मोमेंट, अब मुझे भी बताइए वो क्या टेक्निक थी। कभी उस वीडियो को लेकर के 10 बार देखता है कि उसने कैसे उसको पलटा था। तो इन्हें जो सीखने की वृत्ति से काम करता है उसके लिए सीखने के बहुत अवसर होते हैं।
That's all in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. And we will be back with more news as it breaks only here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.